All right, let's get started. I'm Gil Syswerda. This is what we're calling the AI Zoom. It comes out of a mailing list that I run called Investing in Disruption, and there's a lot of interesting content on investing in disruption. And if you'd like to join, just drop me an email, and I can put you on the list. So what we do here is really just talk about the same things on investing in disruption. We track AI as best we can. Dan and I both track it, was kind of as part of our jobs, right? And we're going to run through some topics, but also we would like anybody to ask questions, right? And open up discussion on any topic you want. A little bit of introduction to myself. I've been a machine learning AI person for really quite a long time. I wrote my first AI machine learning program, I think when I was 17. It goes back a ways. That was interfacing with a mainframe using a teletype, and I had to save my programs on a punch paper tape. And back then I wrote a program that taught itself how to play tic-tac-toe. It's by playing itself. So I was pretty proud of that back then, and I had nobody to show it to because none of my friends did any of that kind of stuff. Right? So I've done over the years a number of startups. Ann Arbor Softworks was my first one. We did graphic software for the newly introduced Macintosh. Bit of a pause after that as I was in industry, and then at BBN Labs and in the AI group there, and then launched out of there Optimax Systems. That was a company that used AI to do detailed production scheduling in factories and improve throughput in factories. That was quite a successful run. Got acquired by IT Technologies. Then my business partner and I, we started Machine Insight and focused on building technology to find patterns in data. That transitioned into Percipio, a fully automated hedge fund, do systematic trading in the futures markets based on that technology. That was successful as well. We hit our returns pretty much right on the nose. And unfortunately, we ran into 2008 financial meltdown, and that kind of took away our market prospects. Latest company was FeatureX. FeatureX did satellite image analysis, extracting economic and financial data that could be used for trading. And we also did Machine Alpha at the same time, working with a major hedge fund to find patterns in their data.
You want me to get it?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody's talking in the background there a little bit. Anyway, that's me. Dan, why don't I turn it over to you and introduce yourself and what you're about.
Thanks, Gil. My name's Dan von Kohorn. I am a managing partner at Broom Ventures. My background is mostly technical and from inside the financial services investment industry. I started my career at JP Morgan, building software for security selection. Have been doing machine learning and AI work since the late 90s. I studied under John Conway, a mathematician who focused on emergence. Gil studied under Jeff Hinton, who was instrumental in early neural network models. We both have a background in genetic engineering, which is a system or a set of tooling that allows for neural architectures to self-improve. I spent a decade in a hedge fund building neural networks and machine learning tools for security selection. I've been part of a bunch of different tech startups. Most recently, founded a company that was a data transport company, a data pipeline company with Jeff, who's on the call here. And now at Broom Ventures, we invest in early stage disruptive companies. We've identified a trend that we like. We've observed the dramatic outperformance of tech over the last year, over the last 5 years, over the last generation, and also the exaggerated expected returns and risk as you go earlier and earlier. So we built a fund model around the earliest stages of disruptive technology companies. And we have a model that we think helps to mitigate the risk and improve the expected returns through active involvement with the team. So we call ourselves Broom because, you know, your employees, they leave at 5 and there we are still sweeping the floors like co-founders do, with the founders trying to improve the outcomes of the companies. I've known Gil for a few years now and respect his understanding of the technology, AI trends tremendously. So we've been chatting about this for years, and I think it's been advantageous in my investment decisions, my understanding of the space. He launched this group called Investing in Disruption and has brought in some folks from Real Vision as well and grown the community. And it's been just great to be a part of it. So I appreciate it. I'm happy to contribute. And the mailing list, if you're not already on it, is a good read. It's a quick way to stay up to date on some of the most interesting news, and Gil's insights are, I think, quite valuable. So I'm glad to be here sharing a little bit about what I'm seeing in AI and in disruptive technology in general. From an investment perspective, there are all kinds of different trends that we can point to and talk about today, and we have a long agenda, so I'll give it back to Gil. But thank you, Gil, for setting this up, and thanks everybody for being here.
Thanks, Dan. Just a slight correction. I didn't study under Hinton. I studied under John Holland.
Sorry.
Just set the record straight. Also, it bears mentioning that Dan and I both feel like we're in a rapid run-up on AI to AGI and then possibly superintelligence, and that drives a lot of our thinking and a lot of our investing. So Jeff, if you could open the screen up to everybody again, because I like this to be interactive among all the participants. Okay, great. All right, so I guess the first thing I'm going to talk about is the news that just came out. I only saw it an hour ago, right? And that is that Google has announced Gemini, a competitor to OpenAI's GPT-4, and claim, through extensive testing that it's better than GPT-4 in essentially all regards, right? So, and their ultra model, they say, it operates at human expert level in virtually all tasks. It's a pretty big announcement. They also announced Gemini Nano, which is designed to run on smartphones independently. So that's going to be interesting to see as well. So the outline that I sent out is already out of date, which is just completely appropriate for investing in disruption. Right? I want to talk about a couple of terms that have been in the news. Certainly in the AI news, right? One is effective altruism. If you're a subscriber to the New York Times, it's worthwhile to do a search on on articles in the last week on effective altruism. They've done a pretty deep dive on the people involved. It overlaps with the OpenAI saga, right? So effective altruism is kind of a movement, a thought that's not very consistent among all the participants. Where you should spend your time to try to do the most good for the most people, just as a focus, right? And if you run that out to its ultimate conclusion, you realize that you can do the most good for the most people by not allowing AI to destroy humanity. And there's serious thought about that. Serious people. Thinking that they really need to do something about it, right? So it wouldn't be such a big deal. It would be like just another fringe cult, thinking. Except there's a lot of billionaires in this group of people, and they've done some crazy funding to move the effective altruism agenda forward, right? So Just as one example, Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of FTX, they invested $500 million in a small startup, Anthropic, whose mission was to create safe AI. They went from nothing, a nothing little startup, to becoming a player because of that investment. Of course, FTX is now bankrupt, and Sam Bankman-Fried is going to jail, but Anthropic had the money, right? And started building systems, and now Amazon has committed $4 billion to them. I think Google another $2 billion, something like that, right? So they're off to the races and are now a key player. It was driven by effective altruism because Sam Bankman-Fried, was an EA person, right? And the blow up at OpenAI, certainly overlap with that kind of thinking as well. So it's just a sign of our times, right? So that this kind of thinking can have such major impacts on business in the world. The other term that's thrown around at the same time is effective accelerationism, right? So that line of thinking is that we are headed for AI, and it's going to be great for humankind, and we are going to, end up in a post-scarcity technological utopia, right? So that's the ultimate outcome, and since this is going to happen, we should try to make it happen as soon as possible, because that does the most good for the most people quickly, right? So two completely contrary conclusions on where AI is headed, right? So, and that thinking, these are called techno-optimists. That kind of thinking drives a lot of people as well, including a lot of billionaires, right? So kind of a state of the world. Since the changing topics here a little bit, since the last time Dan and I did this, Dan and I, it became apparent we had different views of what AGI is, artificial general intelligence, and so we worked a little bit to refine our thinking on that. I sent an email out on this, but I'm just going to read our definition that we came up with, right? So, artificial general intelligence, AGI, describes autonomous systems that outperform humans or can learn to outperform humans at most economically valuable work. And AGI will be able to reason about what it knows, to plan, and to learn from experience. Okay, so that's a higher bar than we set in the last Zoom, right? So, being as good or better than humans at most tasks doesn't require autonomy. And if an AI is going to have a major impact in the world, it also needs to be autonomous and have agency. It needs to be out in the world doing stuff, right? So that creates the bar a little bit. It pushes the timeline out for me maybe a year. So instead of AGI in the next 2 years, I expect it maybe in the next 3 years. Doesn't really make much difference of where we're going to end up in 2030, but I just want to put that out there. Okay, so a background topic, because this comes up, and it's just for better understanding AI. People use the term foundation models, right? So it's used all the time, right? It's these big models created by some of the big tech firms who have the compute and financial means to actually create these things, right? They're huge, right? The parameters are measured in the hundreds of billions or even trillions of parameters, right? In the case of GPT-4, right? So you could ask the question, why are they so large, right? So why are these giant neural networks basically getting bigger and bigger all the time, right? So, and there's two reasons for it. One is that just on the simple fact that bigger is better. And the bigger your network, the wider it is and the deeper it is, and the more data you give it, the better the results, right? So, and people have figured out what they call scaling laws about how you can balance it out. If you have a budget, a dollar budget, you can apply some formulas now to how much data you're going to feed the training, and how much compute you're going to apply to it on a moment-by-moment basis, and how much time you have to run that compute. All of these things cost money, right? And so they define your budget for being able to create these foundation models. So the big tech firms that have billions of dollars to spend, they create giant ones. Smaller startups create much smaller ones, right? And open source kind of works with the scraps, right? So, or models that have been released by some of the big tech companies. there are no huge foundation models, the really capable ones that are accessible to the open source community. They're all relatively small, tens of billions of parameters as opposed to trillions, right? So it kind of defines the landscape.
There's a little bit more complexity to this story, so let me just throw this in there as a
Okay.
bit of a monkey wrench. The foundational models tend to get larger as big companies are throwing more resources at them, and that improves their performance. But then there's another trend that's happening where after these models are built and trained, there's processes that can be applied to prune the weak connections among the internal nodes and quantize the parameters to rather than allowing them to be sort of closer to a floating point number, just compressing them down, rounding them off, and making a smaller number of available values for those parameters. And when you do that, you shrink dramatically the size of the model without really impairing its performance very much. So the foundational models, the state of the art is getting bigger and bigger, but then during that process, there's a post-processing optimization that allows for massive compression of these large models. And we should see over time a bifurcation where the most performant models are running in cloud systems that are large and have a lot of compute power available for both training and inference. But these compressed models that come out of the optimization process can run on a phone. And so I think we're going to end up with the advanced models running in the cloud and a lot of everyday common inference running locally with low-cost compute just at the edge.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's another point you can make about these models too, is that they train on everything in the kitchen sink all at once, right? So if you look at the announcement for Gemini, for instance, they say they simultaneously trained on text, on computer code, on audio, on images, and on video, all mixed together, right? So, and the reason they do that is because it was discovered, within the last few years that if you train, let's say you want to build a cat detector, so you train on detecting cats versus not cats in images, right? So if you train on and you'll get a result. If you train on detecting 1,000 different things all at once in images, and then test for cats, your cat detector will improve. Because these neural networks generalize across these things and build a better world model, right? So, and so it's kind of everything in the kitchen sink on building these foundation models, because overall it boosts everything up to have everything together, right? So
this is a really important idea. This is the basis of emergence, and what we're observing is that if you train a model just on text, the way that it predicts the next word, that relies on a model of the world. And so these models under the surface really do understand what you're saying. It's not just a stochastic parrot, people have called it, to try to predict the next word. It is trying to predict the next word, but in order to predict the next word more accurately, it has to have a good model of the world. And so when you train a model on all the text that you can find, it builds up a worldview, a world model that includes things that you might not expect it to know. It understands the relationships between things. It understands colors, things that are hard to describe with words. It captures those ideas pretty well. And as you go multimodal, if you include images and audio, the world model, the understanding of the world improves dramatically.
Sorry, I've been doing some Zoom meetings.
Porter, you're on audio. There you go. So as you go multimodal, the benefits that Gil's talking about, where, you know, if you train a model just on cat, not cat, it is worse than if you train a model on cat versus everything else. And that improvement continues as you expand from language to language and imagery, language and audio, language and video. So with images and video, for example, you get a increased sense of physics and light transport. You understand material sciences better. These things are emergent phenomenon that come out of multimodal training. All right.
All right, thanks, Dan. Just briefly, also, there's a system that was produced by Google about 18 months ago called Gato. It was an experiment, so it wasn't a very big neural network, maybe 1 billion or 2 parameters, a transformer, and they trained it simultaneously on text, conversational text, a chatbot. They included playing video games. They included controlling a robot. 600 different tasks, all mixed together, right? So it had to learn all these things simultaneously, right? With the same parameters for every task, playing Atari video games and having conversations, right? And they found out that network could learn everything, all mixed together, right? So the representational capabilities of these neural networks, especially transformers, is really quite remarkable, right? Which is what's driving the boom in AI, right? So,
are you guys open for questions?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. I saw a company about a week ago called Neural.io, and they claim that they get around the need for a gigantic database by mining information through the internet. So they'll look, say they wanted to profile you, Gil. I would just give your name, a couple little pieces, and then we go scrape the network and profile you. Now, if I'm looking at a whole database of Gils, everybody in this room on this call, it could start to aggregate all that just by going out and not building their own proprietary database, but collecting the information from the web and using it, but not storing it in the same way. Does that seem to make sense?
That's actually a pretty common technique, Rich. You train on you create a foundation model of some kind, right? Because you need to model the world, and then when let's say you're running a chatbot, when you type at a chatbot, like ChatGPT, you don't really know what's going on behind the covers, right? So there could be a lot more text and content being inserted into that prompt buffer than it shows you, right? So as you're typing and you're asking about one thing or another, right? Now, I'm in the context, behind the scenes, it can go Google me and maybe read some of my content on the web or some of my old research papers or whatever, come up with a description of myself, which then inserts unseen into the prompt buffer, so then it can give you a better response for me, right? So, and then there's that techniques, generative augmented retrieval, that's a big technique, right? So if you go on Bing, Bing, makes it very obvious. You type in something on Bing, using GPT-4, it shows you what's going on the web and informing itself, and then gives more factual responses to your queries on Bing, based on what it found on the web. We're going to talk just a little bit about kind of augmenting these models with different kinds of information. So I'll cycle back to the topic, Rich, in a little bit. So
thanks. I'm just trying to figure out where the investment opportunities. I mean, you got the big Googles and the Facebooks, and then we have these little startups that seem like, how are they going to do it when it took $1 billion for whatchamacallit to make ChatGPT? And I'm saying this thing, it seems like there's no good entry point, like when Tesla did it, to use your favorite example, Gil. Well, who can we invest in, public or private, where we can start sharing the upside?
Yeah, well, public, you can invest in some of the big players, that are building foundation models. Google, for example, right? So,
yeah, which I'm already in, but I'm looking at, the Teslas of the world when it was 10 cents on the, for $1 million now.
Yeah, well, a lot of those companies, Anthropic, for instance, which is growing, by leaps and bounds, is not public, right? So you'll have to find a way to acquire some of the private stock, right? So and there's ways to do that, right? So they're not always reliable, so you're taking some risk, but there's a lot of startups that you can invest in, right? Angel investing and so on. A lot of them are just derivative off of these foundation models, putting some app layer on top of it. That can be risky business because technology advances pretty quickly, and it's not clear you have a moat, or even that the big tech companies like OpenAI aren't just going to release new features in general that just completely smacks your business model, right? So investing in AI is kind of a tricky thing. Another way to invest is you look at some of the big companies that can really benefit from adopting AI in their internal processes and really boost their productivity. It's then you have an established company and they're just going to become more profitable, let's say, and your investment should do okay. You're not going to get killer 10x returns, but your portfolio should do pretty well if you can identify those kind of companies.
Or the other opportunity there maybe is, what are the brand new business models and businesses that don't exist today that will be enabled by this technology, and identifying those early on. I mean, if you look at the Ubers of the world, if you identify those early on, and they wouldn't be working without GPS and mobile and everything else, it may be the same thing here. I mean, everybody's chasing the big players and the foundation level, but it may be who are the entrepreneurs who are really going to be bringing new offerings to market with great product market fit. Yeah, and those might be the areas where they may not be as sexy. But to your point about Tesla, that was the type of thing, if you got in the early part of it, was looking at the leadership and basically the vision that he had, and do you believe in that vision? And it may be the same thing with some of the new applications and businesses that are built upon AI and going forward. Don't know what those are, but
yeah, in that regard, AI, Tesla's probably still a good investment because they're going after AI. They're going after humanoid robots and, of course, full self-driving. Right, so they have an association with XAI, Elon Musk's new company. Right, so not quite sure exactly what.
Bill, based on you, I made an investment. So if I lose it, I'm coming after you. If I win, I'll buy you dinner.
Great.
Rich, I would be really careful thinking about investing in foundation models. There's something important has happened over the last 6 months. Essentially, all of the foundation models have adopted OpenAI's protocol. So their interface has now become standard, and you can swap out foundation models simply by sending the same request payload to a different URI. So if you want to pull out GPT-4 and put in Claude from Anthropic or Mistral or Code Llama 2 or any of the other foundation models, it's very easy. So there's essentially no switching cost. And these models have capabilities that are distinguishing from each other. So I think the foundation model is a really dangerous place to invest. It requires a lot of upfront capital. It is very risky, and it's likely to shift toward a winner-take-all model, with open source being quite powerful and the proprietary models advancing at such a clip that I don't know that that's a space where I would feel comfortable investing. I explicitly would not feel comfortable being there. The parts of this ecosystem that I like are, they sit on top of the foundation models, and they are really in like an application layer where you want to be selling the work product, not the tooling. You want to own the workflow, the value proposition to the end user, own the customer, and anticipate that the cost of tooling goes to zero. And
That's
if you,
basically what Scott was saying, I think.
yeah, I agree with what Scott says. The other part of that is I think you, where possible, want to own the beginning part of the data pipeline, the proprietary raw data, sensors at the edge, users, content, places where the data comes into being digital in the first place. Everything after that, all of the extraction, transformation, loading of content, all the manipulation of the data after it's already digitized, that is going to get squashed to zero, and all of the post-processing will become free, built into the AIs, but the origin of the data will become a bottleneck and a point where you can establish a durable moat for revenues. I think there's also, a bunch of other ways to play this from an investment perspective. Probably we can anticipate that there's almost no future scenario where compute goes down. So we should continue to expect that the demand for compute goes up, probably goes up even faster than it has been over the past 5 years. There's increasing pressure to diversify away from NVIDIA, but NVIDIA currently has an essentially a monopoly on the best chips for performing training and inference. There's a lot of competition coming, but that is a very slow process. So I think owning compute is also strong, owning physical infrastructure, and as productivity improves and the demand for compute improves, it implies a lot of increasing demand on some of the physical infrastructure that is required in order to run all of this. So chips and raw materials like copper, lithium, and iron should, I expect, come out of a long period
This is Matt.
of investment and
Hey, Doug, how are you?
more demand. There's another factor too, which is when you're investing in these early companies that are disrupting large public markets or large public companies or large private companies, you want to make sure that the startups, the innovative companies, have the ability to achieve distribution faster than the incumbents are achieving innovation. If you are a startup with an innovative plan and you can beat the incumbents on tech, you need that advantage to last long enough that you can grow and actually make an impact and capture some market share. If your distribution grows slower than the incumbent can innovate, then you've chosen the wrong market. And I guess finally, I might add that I think that the disruption that's coming from these technologies is underestimated by markets. I think markets have a very strong propensity to estimate risk based on the recent past. And so as you look backward, the risk premiums that are appropriate for corporate debt or other credit instruments, these are probably based more on what's happened in the last 10 years than what's going to happen in the next 10 years. And so I think that systematically the economy is underestimating risk, and I would probably be short credit spreads and long vol. I think that in this kind of an economy, you want to invest in things that are anti-fragile, a little bit like the Nassim Taleb model. And I think it's probably appropriate to anticipate fat tails on the outcome distribution. So be long vol and probably don't sell options into this market.
Let me just expand a little bit on Dan's comment on hardware, right? Compute. seems increasingly clear that one of the big applications of AI is going to be AI agents, personal assistants for people, right? So, and that compute has to happen somewhere, right? It's inference versus training, which is good because inference is 1,000 times cheaper than training, but it's still a lot of compute, right? So, so you have to kind of get a read on just exactly how and where these agents are going to run, right? So that makes Apple a play because Apple is already building AI hardware into their phones, right? So it makes Google get another play with their Pixel phones because they also have AI compute hardware, and I think that's just going to increase over time, right? So you can kind of look at it's called edge computing. You can kind of get a feel for who's a player in edge computing, right? Either by making the devices, the actual devices, or by supporting those devices with hardware, right? So, and the hardware play, NVIDIA has been a no-brainer investment, for the last several years. I'm lucky enough to have invested in NVIDIA maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and have ridden it up, right? Because you could just see the compute demands of AI increasing, and it's just exploded in these last few years, right? So, and NVIDIA stock has followed, right? So, another place to invest potentially is biotech, right? So, AI is playing an increasing role in drug discovery, right, and discovery of treatments and diagnosis. But just focus on drug discovery, right? So, AI can really shorten the time it takes to find, and eventually deploy a new drug, right, for a disease, right? Now, you don't want to invest in this is investing in a startup kind of a play, right? You don't want to invest in a startup that's going to try to take a drug to market because that takes forever, right? You have to go through the whole approval. It's a regulated industry. However, you can do a drug discovery startup that works with big pharma, right? So, and produces products or intellectual property for them, and then potentially actually get acquired if your team is good enough and your product's good enough, right? So there's your exit as an angel investor, right? So no matter how disruptive the market is in terms of business and AI replacing people's jobs and so on, there's still a human base that needs to be serviced. We're human beings that have medical needs, right? So that's a good area to invest in as well.
Hey, Gil.
Yeah.
One quick question. Forgive me if it was mentioned and I missed it, but any thoughts on, speaking of late breaking news, any thoughts of how AI Alliance might affect the landscape, with open source models, as far as the viability of smaller startups to survive in this environment?
Yeah, it's not clear. Some of the big players aren't part of that alliance, right? So this is a gathering up of the also rans, right? So who want to be big players, and there's not a good history of companies, competitive companies creating these alliances and actually moving the needle. But maybe I just haven't paid that much attention to it yet. It's new. I think the announcement of Google Gemini is way more important than that alliance. But
yeah, it just seems to me that you're right about history. On the other hand, I think that you have some organizations with fairly big pockets like Facebook and IBM, and the sense of desperation to compete may drive a longer lasting alliance than you might expect.
Maybe just have to see what their intents are, and who's going to put money into what, right? Because nothing happens without significant funding in this industry.
I like alliances. I did some volunteer work for the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance back when there was no standard for off-chain trusted compute, and helped to write the standard for off-chain trusted compute. And that establishes protocols that can become standards for an industry. And when you have standards, then you can achieve better scale and better competition. Those two factors can be really powerful for driving a market. Scale leads to economies of scale and lower prices, and competition leads to better services and better pricing for consumers.
I'll just mention one more thing. It's always hard these days to count on government, but if I were in government and I was looking at a way to effectively start to regulate AI, putting big government money behind a counterweight like this would be a very effective way to do it, I would say.
I have a wish list for government. I'm not seeing, but
I think the challenge with the
And
standards,
besides the wish part, right? So,
I think the challenge with the standards from an investment point of view is it probably sucks a lot of the alpha out of the opportunities if you're starting to do more of the standardization there. And the question is, where do people have that competitive advantage? If I could just refer back to I've been listening, just the comment a few moments ago was that, looking early on in the funnel in terms of where the information is coming in.
Yeah.
Earlier in my career, I was at Dun & Bradstreet, and I had designed, set up, and launched their global account program. And one of the big opportunities we were looking at was, could we sell all of this sort of early funnel information to companies like hedge funds who have their different algorithms and they're trying to seek alpha? And the challenge that we had is that, yes, we could, and yes, there was a lot of interest, but, we'd really want to do that on a value-based pricing point of view. But if you're looking at a company like a Bridgewater that's, moving heavily into AI right now in terms of a lot of their analysis and decision-making, they are not going to share how they're using the data, what value they're getting out of the data and such. But I think there may be one of those things there where it's sort of, outside of the federation. So it's something that's really looking for what is that competitive insight and competitive opportunity. And I don't think it's going to be the company that has all that information, but it's probably going to be the company that really knows what to do with it to get that insight. And I think in the financial area, just given how much, combination of greed and smarts are there's probably going to be some investment houses that are going to lead the pack by, 100x versus the competition in the future. Whether or not you could identify them and get into them early, I don't know, but it may be something to think about.
Rentec,
Yeah.
Two Sigma are leading the world in this space. There are other incredibly strong firms, but the level of integration now across data sets to make predictions in financial markets is so sophisticated. When I got out of that business in 2012, it was already getting to the point where the complexity meant that you really couldn't any longer compete with a team smaller than, say, 100 people.
What was I'm sorry, what was the company you mentioned?
Two Sigma and Rentec, Renaissance Technologies.
Okay.
yeah, but the last I heard was about a year ago, Two Sigma, basically wasn't doing all that well on their returns, right? So all that data processing integration, hasn't been getting them alpha, right? So it's a hard problem, right? I mean, I have a lot of experience in building predictive systems for hedge funds, right? So
there's so many domains that are way easier to achieve fundamental value. If your goal is to achieve fundamental value, which it should be, then you probably want to be applying these technologies into the medical space or into the supply chain, distribution, services, business services. There's so many other ways to apply these technologies to create substantial value for a large number of people. And the stochastic arbitrage that you can discover for the financial markets is super fun and attractive because it lets your computer, make money for you. But it's increasingly difficult, increasingly crowded, and probably every transaction you make is, an opportunity for some bot to pick your pocket.
That's right. We haven't even talked about all the bad things that can happen, but Scott and Dan, going back to your points about data, right? There's probably another way to look at it if you just move forward a year or so, right? From where we are now, to where we're going to be. We are headed towards AGI systems. Basically, systems that are as smarter than a person, at economic activity, and have agency. They're in the world behaving, right, and doing stuff, right? So if we have something like ChatGPT came out a year ago, right? It was trained on data that ended September to 2021, right? So it didn't know anything about what happened after that, right? So GPT-4 Turbo, upped it to April of this year, right? So all right, so how exactly did OpenAI do that? Nobody really knows, right? Because you can't just train on more recent data and ignore the past, because you start it starts forgetting the past, and you basically destroy your world model, that was there before, and replace it with something else, right? So it's tricky to do that kind of updating. Now make it real time, right? You have autonomous agents running around the world, or they're representing you, to the world and so on, and they're interacting, they're having experiences, right? So, well, you want an AGI to learn from experience, right? So the primary source of data in the future is not going to be the past. I mean, the past is fixed, and everybody already has a copy of it. It's modifying that world model with very recent data. Um, AI agents, that are gaining experience in the world, doing stuff. That includes robotics and it just includes Twitter, people tweeting and so on. It's all real-time data, and it's a known problem, and the AI companies are going to eventually figure out how to have their world models update in a real-time basis, right? So
Yep. Where does backtesting fit into that? So as you're talking about the current data, but you come up with different hypotheses, does that have to be financial? I mean, when you're talking about less of a focus on historic data, don't you really need that for backtesting, though?
Well, what you need is, basically what they're doing now with red teaming is, watch what the systems do in real time, right? Interacting with users and or interacting with testers, and making sure that the thing hasn't strayed, gone off the rails, right? So, backtesting, in terms of training large language models, right? So, neural networks, the transformer type neural networks are really good at generalizing over data, right? They don't make that many mistakes, right? So, it's just part of the magic of the technology, right? So anything you layer on top of it after the fact, you definitely want to backtest, because you can break stuff, right? So, if you have let's say a robot that's running around, factory floor, interacting with all kinds of stuff, other factory workers, human workers, all kinds of weird situations, that come up, you want that robot to learn, right? So based on experience, so if it runs into something, unusual, and it has to figure it out, you want it to remember how it got figured out, so the next time it doesn't have to figure it out again, right? So, same thing with autonomous agents running in the world. If you have some agent, your company has some agent, doing financial transactions and trying to make money, in the real financial world, you want it to learn, right? You don't want models running on the past. You want models running on what's happening currently, right? So
I suspect Google has already figured this out, and that decentralized incremental learning is already part of Gemini. I don't have any proof of this, but I suspect it's so. Particularly after DeepMind released DLOCO, which is the distributed low communication training system.
Yeah, we should talk about that too, because that's a published paper, that's out, right? So anybody can use it, right? So other nations can use it, startups can use it, open source can use it, right? So it's potentially a real boon. I mean, maybe we should just cover that a second, right? So the foundation models, or just the big neural networks, that are being created today, are being run, optimized, trained on these really huge data center type compute things, right? So many GPUs from NVIDIA, all working together in a coordinated way, right? So DeepMind published a paper that says, that's not necessarily, necessary, right? What you can do is you can break the problem up into a bunch of tiny pieces, run it on a distributed sets of machinery that have high latency communication. So basically, it takes time for these things to talk to one another, right? Minimize the communication. Maybe you have to take more time to optimize, but in the end, you get a model that's just as capable as if you ran it in a completely coordinated way, right? So. Well, that just dramatically reduces the compute costs, right? Because now you can start using cheap compute resources that are spread all over the world, right? So, and build yourself, very capable large language models. So compute costs drop, barriers to entry drop. more access is available to certainly startups and open source, but also other nations. Other nations can't compute these big large language models. They just don't have the compute infrastructure, right? So, and the government's not going to spend $5 billion on a data center so they can build their own large language models, right? So if it's distributed and in the cloud, that just really opens up AI to a lot more use cases across the world, for good and for bad, right? So anyway, that technology is out there now, right? So it got published, right? So along with code, right? So there you go.
Yep. And I think that decentralized learning also enables the incremental learning that you were just talking about. These systems that have to continuously learn as they're experiencing new information. I don't know how it handles forgetting, and as you learn, it's updating its world model and therefore, to some degree at least, overwriting its previous world model. And is that the right thing to do? How long of a time horizon do you need? Does the transformer network naturally handle this well by looking at attention heads of various lengths of time from the present?
And wouldn't it be an integration of the search engine technology along with the AI, because search engines by nature are keeping up to date?
Google has this incredible database that it can use to supplement the AI. It's generally referred to as RAG, or resource augmented generation. And the AI can identify the topic and pull out the context from the prompt that you've given it, and then supplement that prompt window by pulling content from any other resource. And so in Google's case, it has the entire internet to search across. It could theoretically use that all for RAG and supplement.
Right. The problem is that that's a cheat, right? It's an effective cheat and you can use it, right? But it's a band-aid on the problem that these systems can't learn from experience, right? So you basically shove some experience into their prompt buffer, right? So and then have them respond to that, right? So it's not really learning; it's just being augmented, right? So, and Rich, the way search engines work are just completely different than way large language models work, right? Large language models are just as you think of it as a monolithic black box that got trained, right? So,
well, I understood that, Gil, from my experience running speech rec companies.
Yeah.
No, I was just saying it seemed like the evolution is going to be that the two are going to merge. It doesn't make sense for Google, for example, to run two different types of technology when they're both trying to accomplish the same idea and using the same access to information.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the need is very apparent, right? So, I mean, ideally, these systems just continually learn, right? So, as opposed to being trained, in this big computation and then held static for a while, right? So, and then if you have a static model, that's really capable on data that trained on, but that was in the past. How do you represent, the present, right? Because stuff is happening today, and frankly, a lot of the use cases, Google being one of them, you don't want your search results or your Gemini chatbot to be talking about stuff that happened 2 years ago, right? So you want stuff that's in the news today, right? So these things have to learn from experience, or have to have some sort of online learning where the continual new stuff that's coming into the web needs to be integrated into their world models, but it has to be done in such a way that it doesn't forget the past. Based on how large language models work and transformer networks work, there's not an obvious way to do that, right? So that's not to say that somebody hasn't figured it out, and could be that Google has figured it out, could be that OpenAI has figured it out, right? So you can bet that Elon Musk company, working with Twitter or X now, is going to figure it out because X isn't anything current, right? People are going to interact with a bot from X. They want to know what's happening right now, right? So in the last 5 minutes, right, to get a summary, right? Not something from last year, right? So it will get solved, right? So
Thanks. I got to run. Thanks for a
Right.
great session.
And by the way, that's key to AGI, right? Because AGI having autonomous agents running around the world doing stuff, I think learning from experience is going to have to be part of it, right? So otherwise, they're going to be really quite limited.
I think the state of the art in this particular area is called MEM-GPT, and if you're interested in learning more about the differences between the context window, fine-tuning, and training, I think MEM-GPT is a good place to start because they're blurring the line between those three ways of teaching models, allowing the model themselves to manage where information is stored and how it's retrieved, and pulling that out of the context window and into RAG, pulling it out of RAG, putting it into fine tuning, and happening all behind the scenes, depending on the needs of the model. So MEM-GPT is a good place to learn more.
Okay. So there's a lot. This last Zoom was 10 weeks ago. There's a lot that's happened since then. And part of why we want to do these Zooms periodically is just catch up. With what's changed. All right. So I just want to quickly run through all the things that I can see that have changed. We already talked about some of them. Right. So there's a whole OpenAI saga. Right. So which I presume people have been reading about, but ignoring the blow up and then the unblow up of OpenAI, ChatGPT can now both listen and talk, right? So it couldn't do that 10 weeks ago, right? So it can understand images, right? So it understands images shockingly well, right? So on Investing in Disruption, I posted a satellite image that it analyzed, right? And it's just like, I mean, my last company analyzed satellite images. We couldn't do what ChatGPT does now, right? So. And since then, I've given it lots of images, just stuff I take out, just off my phone, and it's just shockingly good at analyzing images, right? So, not quite sure how they pulled that off, right? So it can generate images too, but that apparently runs off a different knowledge base. So you cannot ask it to analyze an image and then recreate that image, having done something to it. That just simply does not work, right? So, and the image generation part of it. It's all cool and nice, but it's not, not anything to write home about because we already know that, systems can generate images. It's not connected to its world model. So the image generation part of it is not as good. GPT-4 Turbo is now out, more up-to-date information, quite a bit better in its world understanding. They announced the GPT chatbot store, right? So, which they then put a pause on for one reason or another, security issues, I think, right? So, but I saw in the news just in the last day or so, they're going to release that again in a month or so, right? So there's this mysterious thing called Q star, which, somehow went into the conversation about, the whole, saga of Sam Altman getting fired. It's apparently real because Sam Altman, said in the interview that he regretted that leaked, but he didn't say what it was, right? So,
I love this. I think one of the greatest things about the OpenAI drama was the confusion and uncertainty about what Q-star was, because it meant that everyone is now speculating about what Q-star might be, and that reveals their vision of what the roadmap should be. And so people are talking about the similarity between Q-star and Q-learning, just in the name. And so maybe it's related to Q-learning, which is sort of a foundational idea, or A-star, which is a search algorithm for traversing a pathway through an unknown space. If it's either of those or anything else, we just don't know. But in the meantime, it has all these scientists and researchers and armchair, observers speculating about what it might be. And so it's been a sort of an explosion of interesting ideas that people are talking about in public related to what they think is going to happen next. And so I think that's been fun. And it probably also helps people to identify valuable areas for future research, because even if they're wrong about what Q-star is, it might be an idea that somebody else pursues. So that's been a fun part of this this drama is the uncertainty and the widespread public response to that uncertainty and the imagination that's come from it.
Yeah, the whole OpenAI saga for me was just like massively entertaining. I mean, I just could not stop, reading about it, right? Because just things unfolded hour by hour, right? So it was really fun that way, right? So
it hits something, sort of core in you too, where you want the company to succeed and the CEO to be the hero and the board is sort of evil and holding them back. And so it rings true for me, at least, being an operator for so long through so many software companies and seeing the board as potentially adversarial. And in this case, they actually became adversarial. And then it really opened up visibility into the effective altruists and what they were up to, and that apparently they had board representation for some it's just like, I hope somebody makes a movie of the whole thing, right? So Google Gemini just got announced. My notes here says it's missing in action, but they announced it early, right? So looks awesome based on their announcement. XAI, Elon Musk's AI company, came out with Grok, right, which is another large language model that is supposed to be eventually be the most accurate model out there, in terms of talking about things that are real. It's certainly not there now. There's this technique that came out. This is pretty important for thinking about startups, called SLoRA. So very briefly, if you have a foundation model, like GPT-4, and you want it to be fine-tuned, let's say, to respond on particular topics in a business, or very personalized to a person, right? So you can tweak these models by having a second neural network, a much simpler neural network that learns how to respond to the very specific use cases that you're trying to use it for, right? So be a financial advisor or give personal advice on relationships or whatever, right? So now OpenAI doesn't make that available for GPT-4, but the open source models, you have full access to the network, so you can layer these little networks and train them, really quite quickly. You can do it on just like a single GPU on a PC, right? So, what came out with SLoRA, that came out of Stanford and Berkeley. They released the code for this. You can very quickly do a context switch on these models, right? And to switch it to the little neural networks that are specific to different tasks, you can switch them out, very, very quickly, within, hundredth of a second, right? So, and so you can now run these neural networks these language models that, let's say, for every interaction they have, with 1,000 people online, it's all custom to them, right? Because it keeps switching these things out really quickly, right? So, that's an angle on personalization of AI, right? So, and it's probably going to be important, especially since it's so fast and so compute efficient. There's this really fun thing that came out. The initial image was something called Spiral Town. I posted that on Investing in Disruption. So somebody has figured out how to take on, at least on the image generation side, although it's a pretty general technique, you can do it on other things as well, including getting systems to speak in a very specific way about topics, right? So, but for images, somebody just hacked up an image of a town, a medieval town, and specified through a control network that it should generate a spiral, but also be a town, right? So, and then the story is, he got it to work really well. So he just a jaw-dropping image of a spiral town, right? So, and he posted it on Reddit, and then went to class or something, right? You just checked out for half a day, right? In the meantime, the internet just blew up, on that image, right? So, and he wasn't even paying attention, right? So, so it's a very cool thing, right? So, and it has some really nice application areas. It also could be used to manipulate people, I think, because if you can control the output of an AI through something like ControlNet,
it's a risky business. You don't know that things are being changed in very subtle ways, right? So, you know, so that you know, advertisers could use it, right? So, you know, or manipulation of politics and so on, right? So it's dangerous and cool at the same time, right? So another cool example of controlling, you know, an image generation is you can create images that are QR codes, right? So, and you see these images, and they just look like, you know, images with a little bit of weirdness to them, right? So, but they're recognizable images, and they scan as QR codes, right? So the control net has imposed over the image generation process, you know, create this image of whatever, right? But also make it this QR code, right? So it shows a level of control that can be exerted.
I think there's two things there. One is the cost of content creation is going to zero, and the level of control that you can exert over the content creation is going to infinity. So you can make an image look however you like, and also insert into it subliminal messages or control systems or essentially anything else, so that it works in a certain way or manipulates people in a certain way. The cost of that is going down, and the composability is going up dramatically. So if you're investing in the content space, be aware of those two very powerful trends.
Yeah. And robo-taxis, I'm sure y'all heard that GM Cruise is basically out of business, you know, or, you know, it's flat on its back because, you know, GM just realized that, you know, they're never going to get there from here, right? And they had a horrible accident with a person being dragged by one of their robo-taxis, right? So it's not easy to build autonomous vehicles, right? So, and you know, it looks like Cruise is just, you know, doesn't look like they're going to go anywhere at this point. In contrast,
Bill, I have a question about this for you. I don't know what the answer is, but in many other domains of AI, the market leader invests $100 million or $500 million to set up these initial models, and then a year later, some small group with a tiny budget releases an open source version that gets you 80% of the way there, or 90% of the way there, and the open source world, or the fast follower world, spends a lot less. And so in this case, Tesla with full self-drive is leading the way. They're investing a ton of money, and they will probably get there first. But when they do, the fast followers should be right behind, maybe. How do you think about this?
I don't think so, because I think the approach that Tesla has taken by building a fleet of cars, millions now, you know, that have essentially all the full self-driving hardware in them. You know, I mean, even if you don't pay for full self-driving, all the compute is there, right? And the cameras and everything else, right? So they have the ability to watch how people drive and learn from that. You know, nobody else has that capability, right? So I think what's going to happen is that, you know, if Tesla solves the full self-driving problem, which, you know, I think they will eventually, you know, so knock on wood, that they're going to license it to everybody else, you know, and they're going to be, you know, software licensing firm. You know, it's going to be more profitable than you know, selling cars to us, right? So I think if they solve full self-driving, you know, and you know, fully, so we can have robo-taxis running around the world, taking people from point A to point B, they're going to build robo-taxis virtually exclusively, you know, and they're going to license software, and that's what Tesla is going to be, and they're going to have, of course, everything else that they're doing in terms of virtual power plants and humanoid robots and so on. But
that's the thing, Gil. I think two things there is, number one, on the humanoid robots, they're going to be using the same AI platform with the same type of knowledge base as they.
Yeah, they're using exactly the same compute hardware in their you know, that they have in the cars and the robots,
yep.
Right?
And then the second part is, you had mentioned the XAI a few moments ago with Grok. If you think about that model, that's being trained on all the real world data that's coming out of both Twitter as well as out of Tesla. And so I think it's going to be, you know, that's going to be a really unique advantage it's going to have versus, you know, a lot of the other sort of more strictly online type data models, you know, the OpenAI or Google, or, you know, take your pick. I think it's going to be a very unique positioning.
Yeah, and you know, and the learning from experience could come into play with Tesla, you know, autonomous vehicles as well. You know, so I have a Tesla. I have the full self-driving, and I watch it, evolve, and it's on version 11, some version of it, and it incrementally gets better. But boy, it's I've had that car for over a year now, and it's a lot better. But wow, it's not there, right? And the rate of progress to get to full self-driving seems a little bit daunting, right? So, and Tesla realized that as well. So they just done a complete do-over on their internal architecture on full self-driving, because these new large language models have shown that transformers can build really comprehensive models of the world and behave in interesting ways based on those models. So they're going full transformers on their autonomous driving. Their approach now is, instead of having AI learn about roads and lines on roads and other vehicles and so on, and then there's human code that gets layered on top of all that detection that tells the car how to drive. You have to, if you're going to do that, the human code has to deal with all these edge cases, and there's like an infinite number of edge cases, right? It's just, it becomes impossible. Version 12, which just went out to employees for testing, so I'm hoping I get it, sometime soon, is they're getting rid of essentially all the human code, right? And training the full self-driving system to behave like a human, all the time, right? So drive the car like a human drives the car, right? So, and their training data, they select from good drivers, right? So Tesla, or Elon Musk said they need 1 million videos of, like how to appropriately go to, arrive at a stop sign and then and then depart, right? So it's a lot of data, right? So, but they say this thing is day and night difference than what they did before. This, the car is just so capable now of doing a good job driving, right? So there's some kind of weird knock-on effects that they're going to run into government regulations. For instance, they discovered, on training, going through stop signs, that a significant portion of humans do rolling stops through stop signs, right? So, and the government agencies have already told Tesla on their previous versions, do not do rolling stops, right? So you have to come to a full stop for the 3 seconds, that the law requires, right? So, well, people don't do that, right? So, so what are you going to do? Are you going to, like drive like a person or drive like the law, right? So it's a question that will have to be addressed. Same thing with speeding, right? So people speed all the time, right? So and it's safer to travel, at the speed that other cars are traveling. Don't go slower for sure, right? And not a whole lot faster, right? So are you going to do that, or are you just going to toe the line on the speed limit, right? So these are questions that are going to have to be answered, right? So, but I'm hoping that they get rid of a lot of the edge cases just through training on millions and millions, maybe billions of videos that they're collecting from all these cars running around, right? So if that works, then cool, right? So they've solved the full self-driving problem, right, or a good portion of it. But that's a huge competitive barrier to anybody else doing it as well, because nobody else has that data, right? So so we'll see, right? So I think if FSD V12 looks weak, like, okay, so they maybe improved a little bit, but they have a long way to go. I'm going to be less bullish on owning Tesla. It's, the clock is ticking on that. So in terms of science, DeepMind released a major result on material science, right? So DeepMind is kind of the only organization, really, capable organization that is capable of advancing science using AI. They made a real mission out of that, and things like with AlphaFold, the protein folding and so on. And now they've done it with material science. So their AI has created 2.2 million recipes of mixing materials together to create a new material, right? So and then they ran the simulated chemistry and identified 381,000 materials that they think are stable. And for them, stable means that you can actually get a crystal of the stuff, right? So, and then they publish it all, right? So people are, firms are, running out there and starting making these materials, to see if they can discover brand new materials that have cool properties for manufacturing, for industry, for products, and so on. And so. And they just let it out to the world for free. Right? So then the last two things, there was an AI safety summit in England a couple months ago. That was a big deal. It was in the news. There's a who's who of AI and politicians, right? So a lot of talks, a lot of posing for pictures. England really loved it. They held it in Bletchley Park, where the Enigma code was cracked, right? So made a big to do out of it. As far as I can tell, nothing of substance has come out of that, right? So no regulation. If anything, it hurt regulation in the EU because EU has wanted to regulate AI since 2019, and that now looks like it might be on the rocks. Of course, trying to formulate a policy to regulate AI is hard to begin with, and if you're working from a starting point of 2019, I mean, so many things in AI have changed since 2019. It's like trying to regulate the past, right? So I don't. It looks probable that no regulation is going to come out of the EU on AI in the foreseeable future, right? So, and then there's there was an executive order from Biden. It's called the Biden Executive Order on the Safe, Secure, and Trustworthy Development and Use of Artificial Intelligence. I actually downloaded it and flipped through it when it came out, and read some analysis from law firms about what impact it has, and it appears mostly to be edicts from one government agency to report to another government agency, right? So there's a massive increase in paperwork that nobody's going to read, right? So the one knock-on effect that might be is that it might be harder to sell AI systems to the DoD, to military organizations, because what they call dual use foundation models, right? So what they mean by dual use foundation models is that you can use them to improve business. You can also use them to attack infrastructure, right? So so it might actually limit the federal government from acquiring AI systems to do some of their more secret stuff. And so
I wouldn't worry too much about this. My perspective on this is that all of these regulations and policy announcements, executive orders, are window dressing, and there's essentially no impact on the business world. DoD has already been acquiring systems that have integrated AI and have been for 20 years. This is not a new thing. There are systems that sit currently on warships that detect inbound objects, and depending on their speed and trajectory, will automatically open fire. There's no human in the loop on the trigger, and this has been in existence in deployment for decades. So I don't know that there is going to be a slowdown in these systems. We invested in a company called Anduril that has deeply integrated AI throughout its information aggregation systems and protections for friendly fire, all kinds of systems built in to add intelligence to dual use, and in some cases, kinetic defense systems. So I'm not sure that is actually going to detract from DoD acquisition of hardware or software that includes AI. I'm skeptical of all of this regulation. I think the commercial forces dominate by a factor of 100 to 1 at least.
I'm with you, Dan. Right. So also, when you sell stuff to the intel agencies and DoD, and it's which I've experience with. We did that with Feature X even, right? So is that these agencies want to run on-prem, right? They're not going to run their stuff in the cloud, right? So they're going to want you to install software on servers that are behind the wall, and then they're going to do their secret stuff with it, and you're not going to know what they're using it for, right? So, and that's the way it's been, and that's the way it's going to be. So you're right. I don't think there is essentially no effective government regulation, in the U.S. or the EU. China, on the other hand, is pretty effective, right? So, but they're a totalitarian government, so they can do it.
Right. Their investors are now building AI companies in other countries. So much for the regulations.
Yeah, but they're creating chatbots that are Chinese, very Chinese-oriented chatbots. Those chatbots toe the line, the party line, right? So hard to see what the party line would be in the United States or the EU, right? So basically, right now, all the regulation that happens is self-regulation from the big tech firms, for better or for worse.
All right, we've worked our way through the agenda from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Congrats to us. Now I've got a wild card,
All right.
just in case.
We should look at the chats too, see if anybody's proposing us to talk about anything.
Okay, my wild card is now that it is possible to run style transfer and upres in real time on consumer hardware, it should be possible to re-render video in real time. And so we should expect that we will have control net-like features on live video. So that could be inserting someone's face into a movie, changing the style of a movie, changing a TV show, re-releasing all of the old video games that have ever been made, because you put the cartridge in, it's still the old game, but your TV automatically could upres all the graphics, apply style transfer, and change it into whatever style you wanted. If you wanted photorealistic characters running around in a different kind of world, it could still be the same underlying game with a different visual representation. Reinvigoration, re-release of all previous movies and video games with a new rendered user experience is now going to be possible. So maybe that means along the video game industry, Take-Two Entertainment recently released or announced the release of Grand Theft Auto 6, I guess, in 2025, which promises to be a giant new game. The previous versions were enormous, and this one looks much more photorealistic. But I suspect that console-based re-rendering will open up a lot of new demand, and a lot of people are going to spend a lot of time pursuing escapism and entertainment over the next decade.
Yeah. Besides, if AGI takes over all economically valuable work, what are we going to do except play video games, right? So, with Grand Theft Auto, I mean, we talk about like ChatGPT got 100 million users, and I don't know, a couple of months or whatever. And it's all about AI and disruption in business and so on, right? But the company that's doing the next version of Grand Theft Auto, this is the first one that's coming out in years, right? So they promised to do, they promised to do it. It's coming out in about a year, and they released a trailer, right? So in 24 hours, that trailer was viewed 84 million times, right? So that shows the level of interest in video games, right? So that swamps the interest in immediate interest in anything any AI company has done, right? So yeah, maybe we should just all be focused on investing in video game companies.
Well, I spend most of my time investing in B2B SaaS businesses that have very clear value propositions, much more focused deliverables, and it's easy to understand what companies would be in their target markets. But sometimes these consumer businesses, the markets are just enormous, and so in the public markets, outside of early stage and startups, I do like the video game play. I think it has the potential to not only capture continued demand increases, but also reinvigorate all of the past assets that they've invested in over the decades.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should wrap this up. It's it's fun doing the last one. It's fun doing this one. When we do it again, it'll be 2024. So 2023 will be in the can. All right. So hopefully we will have survived it. We've got a few weeks to go.
All of this is changing so quickly that
Right.
even right now, all of the things that we just talked about are already out of date.
Dan,
Bill, thank you for setting this up.
Exactly. I mean, even things like Gemini being released right before we started this video, right? So it might be fun for the next one. Dan, I haven't talked to you about this at all because I just thought about it, but that since we're entering a new year in 2023 was just so consequential, across the board, maybe we should, do some predictions for what the world is going to be like at the end of 2024. That's try to anticipate to anticipate some of these changes, right? So
yeah.
I think because I personally think the world is going to be in a different place by the end of 2024. I mean, the world's in a different place by the end of 2023 from the beginning of the year, right? So it's going to be even more change in 2024, right? So it'll be fun to think about. Anyway, I'll raise that topic on investing in disruption, right? So, and if you're not on investing in disruption, drop me an email and I'll add you. We have some fun discussions over there.
Good luck to everyone with your investment activities. Please feel free to reach out to me individually if you like. My email is up here, and I'm happy to talk to any of you anytime about all of this. It's a great topic, and I learn a lot from talking to folks about it.
And likewise, just feel free to call me anytime or send me an email. All right,
thanks everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.